Assalamualaikum sahabat, bagaimana keadaan kalian hari ini? Kami doakan semoga sehat selalu.
The Muslim youth wants guidance. Well, how am I to live in this glamorous world, Sheikh, if I am to remain faithful to Islam? You tell me, don't borrow money on interest to buy a house. Don't borrow money on interest to buy a car. Don't borrow money on interest to run a business. Don't borrow money on interest in a student loan to pay my university fees. How am I to live? But then we need to explain to the Muslim youth that this did not happen by accident. The Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam prophesied that this would happen. He said the time would come when you would not find a single person in all of mankind who would not be consuming riba. And if anyone were to say, I am not consuming riba, verily the dust of riba would be upon him. Verily the vapor of riba would be upon him. This is Akhir Zaman, the last stage. And the branch of knowledge which studies Akhir Zaman is eschatology. The Christians have their eschatology. The Jews have their eschatology, ilmu Akhir Zaman. We Muslims have ours. But there is something in common. Something in common between our eschatology. And that is that we are now located on the brink of great war. Like when mankind has never experienced war before. The Christians call it Armageddon. The Prophet ﷺ called it the Malhama. Most of mankind will die in the Malhama. The Malhama will be fought between the two powers which are confronting each other in the world today. On the one hand, you have the world of Gog and Magog, the Anglo-American, Judeo-Christian, Zionist alliance, which have NATO as their military arm, and which had tried to capture Russia when the Bolshevik Revolution took place and Russia was imprisoned by communism and the Soviet Union. So Gog and Magog even took control of Russia, which is Rome. And then the Soviet Union was brought down, dismantled, so that Ukraine could emerge as an independent state. So that Ukraine could join NATO when you get a pro-Western government in Ukraine. And when Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, then because the Soviet Union had given Crimea, Russian territory, to Ukraine, it's now Ukrainian territory. When Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, then Ukraine can kick Russia out of Crimea. Russia will lose a naval port in the Black Sea. Russia will be reduced to a third-class power. That was the master plan. So there was a time when Russia was also in the control of Gog and Magog. But then came the collapse of communism in the Soviet Union. And Russia is now returning to rule with the Orthodox Christian faith. And the conflict is between the Zionist world, NATO, who are armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons, and Russia and her allies who also have nuclear weapons. The war is coming because they didn't like the licks that they got in Crimea. It was a humiliating defeat for them in Crimea. And they're being defeated again in Ukraine. The writing is on the wall that Russia is winning the battle in Ukraine. So it is now certain that we're going to end up with the malhama, exactly as prophesied by Prophet Muhammad. This is eschatology, ilmu Akhir Zaman. And when that war takes place with thousands of nuclear weapons being used, most of mankind will die. But that won't be by accident, because Allah said, I'll wage war on you if you are consuming riba. You're living in a world of riba, and nobody lives even a little finger about it. You have biryani for dinner, and you go back home and sleep. Who cares about Allah's law? Who cares about Allah's law in which He prohibited riba? He told us in the Quran, He's going to destroy us all. He told us that in the Quran. In Surah Al-Isra or Surah Bani Israel, the surah has two names. He says, بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ وَإِن مِّن قَرْيَةٍ إِلَّا نحن مهلكوها قبل يوم القيامة أو معذبوها عذابا شديدا كان ذلك في الكتاب مسطورا. And we're going to destroy them all, says Allah. Destroy them all the towns and cities. That's where the banks are, not in Kampung. And those which are not destroyed will punish with terrible punishment. It is something inscribed in the Kitab. So most of mankind will die, but most of mankind deserves to die. Oh yes. You have three options in confronting that glamorous world that's going to be destroyed tomorrow. Three options. The first option is to bring back Islam collectively. And so we're going to shut down the banks. And so we're going to shut down this bogus money and bring back the money which is in the Quran and the Sunnah. That's the first option. You're not going to succeed unless you have the ulama on board. How many of the ulama do you know? Do you know any who want to shut down the banking system? Do you know any who declare about this paper money is haram and we must return to dinar and dirham? Do you know any at all? So how can you restore the deen at the collective level if you do not have the ulama with you? Come on, tell me. If the macro response is not possible, then there is a micro response, and that's Ashabul Kahf. You withdraw from Dajjal's world. You get out of his grip. In Kampung, in the remote countryside, and you build micro-Islam. You build a kampung, a village, in which you will have a market, and in that market you